Well, today it's the 26th of March 2011, and we're here with Dr. Christian Lindtner, and we're going to conduct a dialogue about certain historical issues. But Dr. Lindtner, if you could start by telling the audience what is your background and what is why are we here today?
Yes, right. We have agreed to discuss certain issues having to do with the Second World War, Germany and the Jews. And one might start by mentioning in 1998 I contributed a long paper, a full-page interview to a Danish newspaper called Berlingske Tidende. The title was Holocaust in a New Light. This created a stir, an emotional stir among Jews and among Danish historians. The main point was I brought certain new issues to the fore. There was a long discussion going on for several years. 8 years later, in 2006, I was invited, to my own great surprise, to a conference taking place in Iran, in Tehran. I participated and listened to the various speakers coming from all over the world. At the end of the conference, a committee was formed, and I was also elected to participate in that committee. That, as said, was in 2006. That is some 5 years ago. Since then I've been busy with various other matters, but at one point, perhaps some 2 years ago, I decided to come back to this issue, and then I tried to clear my mind, so to speak, of all preconceived ideas, taking, as it were, a sort of middle path. So I started all over again, as it were, started reading books of one sort or another, as many as I could, and now 5 years later, I think the time has come for me to give an account of the results to which I have come. So then, what was the result that I finally reached? I think it can be put very briefly as follows. We're dealing with the question of the Holocaust or Hitler and the Jews. The very first distinction, as I now understand and realize, is that you must distinguish very, very clearly and sharply between the term the Germans themselves used in regard to the Jewish question, namely die Endlösung, the final solution. Hitler did not know the word Holocaust. The whole word Holocaust comes into the picture later on, after the war. So we must make this distinction. So first we want to deal with the question, what did Endlösung mean, historically speaking? Once we have dealt with this very briefly, then we turn to the second part of the issue, namely the Holocaust. That is, what became of the historical Endlösung after the war? We shall see later on, I think, that there are good reasons, necessary reasons for making this distinction. Holocaust largely has to do with, as it were, a new secular world religion with strong elements of entertainment, business, and many issues and characteristics that we also find in major world religions. Whereas Endlösung is a simple, naked, historical truth, the relationship between Hitler and the Jews. So first I'll give you a brief idea of what I mean when I say Endlösung. That is, Hitler's attitude to the Jewish question. The Jewish question is a very old one in history. But here we confine ourselves to the period of 33 to 45. So, it is very important to make a very clear initial distinction between the Endlösung, which is historical fact, and on the one hand, and on the other hand, the Holocaust, which is a more recent phenomenon that is based upon, but also very much developed from Endlösung, the historical fact. Holocaust, in a very brief way, can be said to be a new world secular religion with elements of politics, entertainment, propaganda, and many features that we usually would call religious. So this distinction is the first thing to be made. Once this distinction has been made, we want to look at part one, namely Endlösung. What was Endlösung? When we are talking about Endlösung, the main figure is Adolf Hitler. No doubt about that. The word of Adolf Hitler, as we all know, was practically speaking law. So what Hitler said and what Hitler ordered had to be done. No doubt, Hitler described himself as a fanatical anti-Semite, already in Mein Kampf. Once we listen to what he has to say in public speeches, and when we listen or read what he has to say elsewhere, and when we listen to what people who were near to him had to say about it, we get the clear and simple picture that this man wanted to annihilate and exterminate the Jews.
Ich will heute wieder ein Prophet sein. Wenn es dem internationalen Finanzjudentum in und außerhalb Europas gelingen sollte, die Völker noch einmal in einen Weltkrieg zu stürzen, dann wird das Ergebnis nicht die Bolschewisierung der Erde und damit der Sieg des Judentums sein, sondern die Vernichtung der jüdischen Rasse in Europa.
Obviously, Hitler did not go and grab his gun and shoot millions of Jews. For this task, he had a very loyal servant who had the cruelty, the determination, the loyalty to do what his Führer ordered him to do, Heinrich Himmler, chief of police. And when you then go to the sources, you will see enormous evidence that Himmler was ready to bring the order, to follow the order of Adolf Hitler. And what was the order of Adolf Hitler, which obviously is not on paper, we can discuss that later on. The order was simply the physical extermination of the Jews. And Himmler, at the top of the police, the leading policeman, had numerous very competent, efficient SS and police people to execute the order in practice. So now we have the picture of the man who gave the order, the man who received the order, and finally we have to have the third part, the men who did the job. These men were members of the SS and of the police, and they obeyed order. To obey the order was a fundamental characteristic of the SS, as we all know. We have enormous evidence now, and we can see that various groups of the SS and police from the Einsatzgruppen, the four Einsatzgruppen, formed in 1941, and the Ordnungspolizei, and this is a very new aspect, little known. They were very busy from the start of the war against the Soviet to shoot Jews. Later on they found other means of execution. This is the very rough outline of what I called die Endlösung. Many problems are still unclear and may remain unclear, but it is a good thing to be able to say that, especially in recent years, German scholars have produced very sound work, as we are used to expect from German scholars. And almost every month new books appear in Germany. In a few weeks from now there will be published a new book by Wolfgang Kurilla about the work of the Ordnungspolizei in all under the order of Himmler and Daluege, the kind of very bloody work they did in Poland. Many other works have appeared recently. We can come back to that later on. Good. So now I've just said a few words about what I mean by Endlösung. As opposed to Endlösung, almost as opposed to, we can speak of the Holocaust. Now, Holocaust was a term unknown to Hitler. unknown to Himmler, unknown to Heydrich. And we really, even though it occurs in the 50s and 60s, it's fair to say that if in 1978, in the beginning of 1978, very, very few Europeans would ever have heard the term. But it changed when a Hollywood film, a docudrama, appeared in 79, then everyone had learned the term Holocaust. Today, you cannot take a newspaper, you cannot turn on your television, you cannot go to school without almost daily hearing about Holocaust. When we look at this Holocaust, not so often we hear Endlösung. It certainly refers to what took place during the Second World War, clearly enough, and still in the focus we have Hitler and the Jews. But now we have quite new ideas associated with the terms as ideas that we do not find with Endlösung, and therefore we have to distinguish. We have ideas of sin. The Germans were the great sinners and they have admitted their sins, and then atonement for the sins. Germany still has to pay for its sins. Many others are considered sinners by Jewish organizations, not by all Jews, but by powerful Jewish organizations. We have other features characterizing the Holocaust that justify that we call Holocaust a religion, namely memorials, museums, places of memorial, days of memorial, even in the calendar. We have priests and prophets, we have witnesses, we have martyrs, we even have heroes who saved Jews or some Jews, and so on and so forth. So when we study, for instance, Buddhism or Catholicism, and look at what characterizes these religions, we shall find that these same characteristics apply to the Holocaust religion, which is a sort of new or modern form of Judaism. I studied history of religions for many years and taught in this field, and I could immediately recognize that the Holocaust should be described roughly as a new religion based on historical facts, but also containing many elements that have nothing to do with history. I mentioned witnesses, and not to forget miracles. There are many miracles in the Holocaust story, which of course have nothing to do with history. So these roughly are the distinctions to be made. An important point having to do with Holocaust is also, as in any other religion, there are heretics. People who come up with words and suggestions that do not belong within the framework of the belief. And these heretics are very important to complete the picture. You can hardly imagine Holocaust without heretics. And so when you have heretics, you have persecution of heretics. And therefore, in the newspapers and on television, you can also read about the heretics. We get names, see if I can remember them all, apart from my own. Then we have people like David Irving, Bishop Williamson, David Duke, the president of Iran, Lady Renouf, and others. But these people, I'm not really sure that they are what they are labeled, namely deniers. My impression is not like that. But real deniers would be academic people, that is, I shall define denier in a moment. Real deniers would probably be Professor Arthur Butts, who published a book in 1976, and Professor Faurisson, a French scholar, very intelligent and active French scholar, who has published many works, above all in French. So these people are being persecuted, that is, fined, and in some cases, depending on the country in which they live, also even imprisoned.